Alright guys, that's coming again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day. So far, we're expecting major changes over the next couple of weekends after the World Cup, potentially involving the biggest teams in the Call of Duty League. Zuma reckons that, yeah, FaZe are still paying their players well, but they cannot necessarily compete with some of the contracts being thrown around this league at the moment. Some players, he reckons, guess who, getting paid $500,000 a year to play Call of Duty professionally, and with some teams potentially FaZe maybe vulnerable already given their performance at the World Championship, could that be enough to tip this team over the edge? Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into today. Quickly, Paul X. He played this year. He was dropped for Kenny. He went to Warzone. He then gave up on Warzone. Then he's back to Warzone and he's qualified for the upper bracket of the World Series of Warzone. So wishing him the best in his next adventure as a player. This was causing quite a lot of controversy last night. Exactly where this came from and what people were talking about here. So last year, Breaking Point, it wasn't me, Breaking Point put out this tweet and it said, could we see this super team at the World Cup? Because last year there was talk about, what would happen, whether they would just form a bit of a God squad and, play for Falcons or something, because it was actually a little bit unclear at the time which teams would even go, whether OpTic would even go to the World Cup was a question last year. Of course, eventually they did, but there was talk that maybe Falcons would come in and they would sign a serious team. They would put together Pred, Shotzzy, Scrap and HyDra. Now, fast forward 12 months, things are a little interesting because as Breaking Point then saying that Generational Haters Club got the team colour and the team mostly right. So, I believe in reference to what was talked about not long ago when there was discussions between OpTic and Hex seemingly wanted to make it happen. Shotzzy, Scrap, HyDra, and Dashy playing for OpTic. So I think this is really what, we were getting at here, is that, yeah, it's a green team. The Falcons was an OpTic, so that was nearly right. And then the team was nearly right. Instead of Pred, it would have been Dashy. But of course, funnily enough, Pred did end up on the Falcons at the end of the year, and we're certainly going to talk about Pred over the coming minutes because yeah, he's living a decent life over there right now. We'll get to that in a second. Before we get there, on the Falcons front, there was talk, and Trey mentioned this on the show a couple of days ago, that there was an attempted buyout of a player by the Falcons. So the Falcons were aware, that seemingly the Ravens weren't aware, that if you want to make a roster change, it can only be a one-man change. And that's what Falcons decided to do. They dropped Priester, they've picked up TJ Halley, and they've put Xnid to the flex. The reasoning apparently is that they think that Pred and Xnid as an SMG AR combo could be an option going forward, with another superstar blockbuster SMG coming in alongside Pred. TJ is there for the time being. Arcetes is still the main AR. You can't imagine that's going to last forever, but they couldn't make another change. But apparently, Falcons, the attempted change they wanted to make before the World Cup was not to pick up TJ on a free, but it was actually to spend big to try and pack a punch their roster before what is a very important tournament to them. And that says rather a lot, right? If they were willing to go and pay a buyout, and apparently a pretty substantial buyout at that, to go and get a player for the World Cup, and maybe it doesn't work out and then you don't even keep him for next year. Like, who knows, right? What the team would do. But the fact that they were willing to do that, a buyout for the World Cup, in the end they got a player on a free, but who was the player? Now, lots of people saw this and were like, oh, it was aBeZy, because there have been rumours about Falcons wanting aBeZy. And that, I think, may well be true, but it wasn't aBeZy in this case. That may still happen, but it wasn't aBeZy. Jake Hell, I don't know if he was talking about that or something else, but it was actually Sib. So, because, Ronnie talked about this, BP talked about it, so I was like, okay, we'll just mention it. And it's been pretty clear that Falcons have wanted to get Sib. And my understanding is that they did go to Sib and were like, hey, or maybe to go Cloud9, obviously, and offered some, pretty good money. I think some pretty substantial money to get Sib off Cloud9. And they were told it ain't happening. So, maybe not happening yet. Sib would be a sensible option in many respects. The history with Pred, I'm sure that Pred would be keen to get him in. And it feels like Falcons Sib is coming. The question is, what is the most sensible team? If you are going to get Sib, and maybe they won't try and get him anymore because maybe there are better options. It's an interesting one because, yeah, they tried to get a buyout for Sib from Cloud9. C9, I think, said no, maybe thinking that they can get more money from him in the future. Possibly, but what if the off-season goes kind of crazy and all of a sudden, Cellium we think is a total free agent. Drazah, total free agent. There are other AR options out there. And if Xnid does a great job at the World Cup on the flex, then maybe that's the option instead. So it'll be interesting because Falcons, I'm pretty sure, wanted to get Sib and wanted to get him now, and they were willing to make that happen. Sib may still go to the Falcons. It's definitely a possibility. But I think for Cloud9, it's an interesting one. In the same way that we are about to discuss, if a player gets a mega contract offer from Falcons, you may be wise to sign it. In the same way, if an organization gets a pretty big offer to sign a player, if you think it's at least in the ballpark of reasonable, you might want to do it, because the thing is with the Falcons is that Sib is far from their only AR option. Maybe he is their preferable option. He is the one that Pred particularly wants. But who knows what happens over the next couple of weeks, and maybe Cloud9 will never get their money for Sib, and if they don't, then maybe that's fine. He stays on the roster and does great things, possibly. But it's not like this season was great, was it? Let's be honest. So yeah, that's one piece of the puzzle in terms of the buyout power that Falcons have to offer, but also in terms of just pure salaries that they can put on the table, right? So it's been a big talking point over the last couple of weeks about where the current teams sit in terms of the funds they have. We know that Thieves, they went through a rebuild year. They took a year, they dropped the salaries, and then Nadeshot was like, okay, I'm going to take a $200,000 pay cut or whatever it was, so we can afford to get Scrap and HyDra. So it's not like Thieves have infinite money, but they certainly have enough money to be very competitive in the market and give those guys, I don't know what the salaries are. I'm sure they are very substantial, right? That would be no real surprise. Now, OpTic, probably in a very similar position. We know they've got good money. I mean, Hector was going to go and get Scrap and HyDra. That wouldn't be cheap and easy to do. Of course, they've not got ventures into all sorts of different esports, so they're not incredibly cash flow negative and stuff like this. They run a pretty lean operation. So, obviously we know where OpTic are going to be, and they're always going to attract people even if they don't pay the most money. And FaZe, that's what's interesting. Now, I think this just came to mind. When Drazah made the decision to go to FaZe rather than OpTic, I think that OpTic said, I may be wrong and misremembering, but I think that OpTic said that their offer to Drazah was like more. Or maybe they didn't say it and maybe he said it. No, it was probably Drazah who said it, that the OpTic offer was more money than the FaZe offer. But he took the FaZe offer anyway because he thought he was going to win more. And maybe there was some logic there. Of course, in hindsight, OpTic have now won 2 back-to-back World Championships, and Drazah would have made more money had he gone there. But, would they have won? Obviously, very different question. Who knows what history says on that? The point being that FaZe have money, right? FaZe are not paying no money for these players, but they're not paying maybe OpTic money or Thieves money. They're definitely paying more than the vast majority of teams, right? And this is why I wanted to share the clip from Zuma, because I made a comment in a video, I don't know, a week or so ago, that FaZe's salary position is a little precarious and they don't have like infinite bankroll. And, I'll still stand by that assessment, but I think, what I was saying at the time was that it's not that FaZe don't have money and they don't pay the players well. I literally said that the players get well compensated for being a professional Call of Duty player and a top one at that. But they don't necessarily have money to compete with some of the other money that's arriving into the league. So Zuma was on stream last night and was talking about this. So I'll share this clip for you because it's very interesting when he says that, FaZe have got money, the players are paid well. I don't know what paid well exactly is in this context. For some time it was 15k a month, 20k a month. I don't know, that adds up a lot over the course of a year, but that's half as much as somebody is getting paid.
Here's my actual opinion.
No.
Okay, listen, hear me out. Despite what happens at EWC, okay, if aBeZy and Simp...
No. By the way, I gotta say this, FaZe is not broke. I don't know where you guys are getting FaZe is broke. They're not broke. I don't know where you guys are getting this, bro. Okay? We've talked about this before. Just because there's a team that's overpaying like fucking crazy doesn't mean that some of these orgs that are paying very well are broke. Okay, I know what FaZe pays their players, and it's very good. It's not bad pay. It's very good pay. Okay, we're seeing fucking organizations coming in and giving fucking $500,000 contracts, bro. I'm sorry, bro, but there's just some players who just, $500,000. That's just fucking crazy. That's insane. Sorry, my brother.
So take a wild guess who Zuma might be talking about here. We've talked about in previous years, contracts in maybe the 300k a year mark, something around that. Anything more than that has felt, a little bit difficult to justify in the world of competitive Call of Duty. But Zuma says, the FaZe boys, they're getting paid nice, right? They're on good salaries, and maybe they've taken pay cuts. I think they probably have. They've literally said it. They've taken pay cuts in recent years. So, but, as I've said, it's not like FaZe don't have money. They do. They just don't have enough, maybe, to compete on this type of level, right? And that's the point that I was making a few videos ago, was that, yeah, FaZe can, they can keep Simp and aBeZy around because they can pay them enough money to mean that they're not just going to be forced out the door, and they will do various things to make that happen. But the problem is they're not necessarily going to be able to hold those players off against another really big offer, right? Last year, Scrap and HyDra were going to go to Thieves, then they were going to go to the Gentlemate, and Nadeshot took the pay cut to ensure that he could pay them enough that they would want to stay at Thieves. In the FaZe situation, it's a bit precarious because aBeZy is very evidently saying, the money that we think Falcons are probably paying somebody like Pred to play for them is in the ballpark of 40k a month. $500,000 a year to play professional Call of Duty for these teams. Now, obviously, we don't know what the actual numbers are, but Zuma said it's $500,000 a year, and presumably, it's probably for the Falcons. I mean, maybe it's Shotzzy on OpTic. I don't know. Maybe it is, but I mean, he makes plenty enough anyway from the stream, let's be honest. So, you've got to presume, if I had to take a wild guess here, I'm probably saying that Zuma's talking about the situation at the Falcons, and as a result, if Pred's getting paid that type of money, or if the other guys potentially are, don't imagine it's on that kind of level, but you know what I'm saying, that will be a particularly compelling offer for another team. And Zuma says, yeah, like FaZe are not able to compete with those level of salaries. And that's fine, and maybe fair enough, if that team is confident that they can still win with that roster. But are they, right? And that's the big debate right now. I mean, aBeZy, I was looking at his tweets, and I just thought it was interesting that he hadn't, he's still not tweeted since Champs, and maybe that's fine, but it's interesting anyway, right? There was no, we lost the tournament or whatever. I don't think there was anyway. There's just been lots of talk about aBeZy, where he might well go next, because the Falcons is absolutely an option, and it has been a big theory that the Falcons are very interested in acquiring aBeZy's services for next season. So I think the point is, Falcons, presumably, and maybe another Saudi team, let's be honest, if they come in as well, have more money to burn than anyone else in this league. And Zuma says that, yeah, FaZe are not able to compete with that. So, if the team is winning everything, their dominance, they're not going to change, sure. But if there's a scenario where Cellium is a free agent, we think that he is, where Drazah is a free agent, where Simp and aBeZy have another year left on their deal, if Falcons come in with an offer for a buyout and they're offering the players, let's say twice what they were getting paid on FaZe, it's difficult to turn that down when the team hasn't won, right? Like if FaZe top 6 at Champs, let's say they, top 4, maybe they make the finals and lose, EWC. If they win, maybe it's a different convo. But if they don't win EWC and Falcons come knocking on the door, it becomes very difficult to imagine a world where those offers end up getting rejected. Certainly by everyone. Maybe some of the guys would be down to say, you know what, no, I'd prefer this. But somebody might say, you know what, yeah, this makes sense to me right now where I am in my career. And all of a sudden then one player leaves and the team blows up. That is a very realistic possibility as it stands. So very much interested in your thoughts on all this in the comments below. Just one final thing to mention, a follow-up from what we talked about yesterday. So Shotzzy was saying the control spawns are broken. This, it seems, is what that looks like. Basically what we're looking at here. On retail accounts here on Hacienda, the spawns, it seems, in control simply work in a different way to, how they might otherwise do. Now, obviously, you can go and microanalyze this and compare some of the details and compare and contrast, basically, between the different spawn systems that happen. But the point that he's making is that for some reason, on the West Coast servers they play on the retail accounts, the spawns literally operate in a different way. And he's just saying, like, this is how they work on those accounts, and that's not how they typically do on those servers. That's not how they typically would. Now, apparently, this is to do with tick rate, which is pretty fascinating, because JP was like, we think that it's server-based, but Ghost of Hope says that it might be tick rate-based, and therefore the public match servers are different to the private match servers on the public builds. So, apparently that might be the issue that's causing it. So maybe when they get out to Riyadh, at least everything is going to be the same. But honestly, who knows? Like, if they play on a server for a match which is a different tick rate to the server they've been practicing on, then the spawns are going to be different. And therefore, what game are we even playing anymore? So just another reason that is causing this tournament, or calling this tournament, into some degree of question. But very much interested in your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.